Hi, Heather. Oh, you're on mute. I have a kitty. Kitty's going to join the call. And I'm looking for one thing. And we have Connor and Jude. So I'm closing one thing and I need to add one thing. I had a file I wanted to share, but I have other files I want to share. So if I can't find um, there we go. I found that. And I'll add some more people. We have people in the waiting room. I need to go back. I think we're good. So I know I see Connor, who I see on mute, and I know I see Jude, who I don't see on mute. And Jude,
Hello.
hello, I can hear you. Yay. And Connor, you want to come off mute for just a moment so I can hear you?
Hello, hello.
Yay. Okay. So all good. And I don't think anybody else is in the waiting room. Let me just pull up participants and make sure I'm not missing it. Oh, there is somebody in the waiting room. Okay, so the main topic today is, well, the topic, of course, you're working on STRs. We received the survey, had over 500 respondents, which was excellent. And so at our last call, which was, I guess it was the second or third Monday in December, Connor, Jude, Joe, and I had the file. And so we were all going to work on it. And so I know I've done some work on it and I wanted to share my findings, and Jude had done some things and she had a perspective also. So I'd like to go ahead and just go ahead and share what I have. I maybe should wait till I see Connor again. I see Connor stepped away for a moment.
Hi, Joe.
Yeah, hi, Joe. And Joe's on mute here. Yay, Connor's back.
Apology. I'm right here. I'm just chatting something up here.
Hello.
Hi. So, okay, I'm going to share my screen. Let me pull up what I want to share first. There we go. That's good. And then there we go. Oh, where's the share button? There it is. So what I did with the survey is, as we had said before, we had 524 responses. So it was a spreadsheet that went up to row 525, but the first row was the header. So there were 524 responses. There were 8 that looked very clear to be duplicates. So by my count, and this is the work that I did, and I have not reviewed this with other members of the ZRC, so you can all weigh in on, you maybe think I should have done something differently, and that's okay to say so, because this is everybody's first time of hearing me tell you what I did with it. So what I did with it is there were 8 duplicates, so that was 516 individual responders. This list has not been scrubbed. I know we talked about maybe we want to go, call some people and say, spot check and make sure that everybody that said they took it did take it, that it was the real person and not anybody trying to do something funny with the numbers. So we didn't do any scrubbing from that standpoint. If we take everything as it's entered, this is the answers I got if we take everything as it's entered. So what I did with the duplicates is the tool let us know what order the surveys were taken in. So for the duplicates, when there were the multiple choice questions, I took the latest answer. The duplicates in each case, in each of the 8, there were 2, they had submitted twice. And what I did is I took the second answer of what the multiple choice was, which is agree, strongly agree, somewhat agree, neutral, somewhat disagree, strongly disagree. So I took their latest answer for that. And I do have a master file that has the comments, and I kept the comments from both responses. So in the comment column, I just put them both there. There was, I didn't want to throw anything out that they had said. But for me to do the math of what the answers were of a numerical perspective, I had to pick which one I'm going to use. And in any event, so I picked the later, figuring that after people had a chance to think about it, probably I should take what they did second, not what they did first. So that being the case, of the 516, there were all the duplicates were Woodstock residents. So that was interesting that of the non-Woodstock residents, there weren't any duplicates. So thank you to the not Woodstock residents for only submitting once. That made life a little easier. But of the 462 rows, 8 were duplicates. So there were 454 individual responders who were Woodstock residents. Of those, 133 had STRs, 2 were duplicates, so that went to 131. There were 329 Woodstock residents that did not have an STR that did respond. 8 of those were duplicates, so 323 individual responders. Of the not Woodstock residents, there were 62. 22 of them had STRs, 40 of them did not have STRs. So of the individual responders, when I did my calculations, I just did the individual responders, not the duplicates. So, and I did not yet read, still doing admissions of people here. I did not yet read all the comments. It took quite a while to do all the math. It was a bunch of manual stuff to, anyway, I won't go through the whole process, but I feel confident in the process. But in any event, I did not yet look at the comments. That's something I do want to do. And I plan to look, I think, in my opinion, these 4 groups are very important. People that are Woodstock residents who have STRs, there was a trend of what they think. Woodstock residents that don't have an STR, there was a trend of what they think. People who are not Woodstock residents but do own an STR in Woodstock, there's a trend of what they think. Not Woodstock residents that don't own an STR, there's a trend of what they think. So my belief is that we should be considering the 4 groups as we proceed. And anyway, so I'll show you the numbers of the 4 groups. So these are the answers. The answers, and I look up at the top of my screen every now and then to see if anybody's trying to get in. So if we look, now I put in here, and I looked at all responders, I looked at Woodstock residents, I looked at non-residents, and as you go down the page, you'll see I did within Woodstock who has an STR and doesn't, outside of Woodstock who has an STR and doesn't. So I have these numbers for each of those groups, but we'll kind of take it from the top. I put a summary of the question. The questions are actually a little longer than this. And I did send this file to the other ZRC members. And part of the conversation here, I know people that aren't ZRC members are asking, when are we going to see the data? So part of the conversation before we're finished is the ZRC to discuss, can I make this available to everybody? Should I, shouldn't I? And then I think that it's okay. What I did is I have a file that, a master file now that has what I said. It has the duplicates removed with, for everybody who did, the 8 who did a duplicate, their latest response, but all of their comments from both of their submissions. And I have a file like that. And what I could very well do is take out the name and the address, and there's a number at the end that was the order that they took it, and just leave that number there. So we know who's who, but it's still a private thing. If I've taken out the columns that say name and address, and all you have is what order they take the survey, I think that may be a way to share it. But again, we'll talk at the end about sharing. But if you look at, so of the 516 responders, notice that in some cases, they didn't all answer all of the questions. So that's why this number is less. I'm going to let that go. It's going to take a minute to get quiet. Okay. So anyway, I'm going to mute it. Well, well, it stopped. Anyway, okay. Alrighty. So, so again, this is a summary at the top. Of the responders, and of course, the total of 100% is just to make sure that my math was right and it adds up to 100. So in any event, if you take the entire group of everybody that took the survey, about 54% said yes, strengthen the STR regulations, about 36% said no. I think what's most, oh, and the other thing is there were 5 choices. There was strongly agree, somewhat agree. I think that wasn't exactly the terminology, but anyway, strongly agree, somewhat agree. For the purpose of getting an idea of what people think, I merged those together. There was neutral, and then there was strongly disagree and somewhat disagree. I merged those together. So I just thought it would help us understand what people think if I merge those together, because if you put too much data, sometimes it doesn't tell you anything if you're too detailed in the data. So I did roll those together. So in any event, if I roll together those that agree, more agree than disagree that we should strengthen the STR regulations. Should there be fewer owner-occupied STRs? Most people, more people disagreed with that. Should there be fewer non-owner-occupied STRs? More people agreed than disagreed. All STRs have, should all STRs have full-time residents on premise during all STR rentals? It's about split. So that's interesting. So we didn't get a mandate from that because it's pretty much split. All full-time residents can have one STR if they are on premise during STR rentals and the room is not suitable for it to be a long-term rental. People more agreed with that than disagreed. All full-time residents can have one STR if they are on premise during STR rentals when the space could instead be an LTR, a long-term rental. So are we saying, are we saying yes, that we could do that? More people said no than yes. It's not a big mandate, but more said no than yes. Should we reduce the number of nights a non-owner occupied STR can be rented? More people said yes than no. Should we reduce the number of nights that owner occupied STR with owner on the premise can be rented? That's kind of a mandate, I think. People said, no, we don't agree with that. It's okay for people, for owner occupied who are on premise. It's okay to have them. Question 9, owner occupied STRs with the owners on premise during rentals are good for Woodstock. Most people said yes. Non-owner occupied STRs are good for Woodstock. More people said no. So, and the biggest number on the page, by the way, is I think there was one answer that got 100%. But anyway, these answers tells you what the general group thinks. If we look at Woodstock residents, again, 454, should we strengthen the STR regulations? All the Woodstock residents as a group, more said yes than no. Should there be fewer owner-occupied STRs? More people said no than yes. Fewer non-owner, more said yes than no. All STRs have full-time resident on premise during rental. Even, once again, a full-time resident can have one STR if they're on premise, but it can't be an LTR. People agreed with that more so than didn't. Can you have one STR if your space could have been a long-term rental? 50-50 split, not a mandate there. Should we reduce the number of nights a non-owner occupied STR can be rented? More people said yes than no. Not really a mandate, I would say, but certainly more said yes than no. Should we reduce the number of nights owner occupied with owner on premise can be rented? People said no, don't do that. That's kind of more of a mandate, I think. Owner occupied STRs with the owners on premise during rentals are good for Woodstock. People thought yes. Whoops. People said yes. Let me get that stuff out of there. And then non-owner occupied STRs are good for Woodstock. More said no than yes. If you look at the non-residents, I'm going through all the categories here because I think we're seeing some trends. For the non-residents, should Woodstock strengthen the regulations? It's kind of an even split. For people that don't live in Woodstock, should there be fewer owner-occupied? People pretty much disagreed with that. Should there be fewer non-owner-occupied? Kind of a split. More said no than yes to reduce that. All STRs have full-time residents on premise during all STR rentals. More of that group said no. That was kind of a stronger no. We don't want to have that in place, is the people that had thought that. All all full-time residents can have one STR if they're on premise during STR, and the room can't be an LTR. They more agreed with that than didn't. That was kind of a big neutral, but in any event, that was the answer there. All full-time residents can have one STR if they're on premise during STR rentals when the space could be an LTR. They disagreed, more disagreed than agreed. Reduce the number of nights non-owner occupied STR can be rented. Should we reduce it? More said no than yes. That we so we should not be reducing the non-owner occupied STR nights. Reduce the number of nights owner occupied STR. Reduce the number of nights owner occupied STR with owner on premises can be rented. Should we reduce it? No, we should not reduce it. Owner occupied STRs with owners are good for Woodstock. People agree. Non-owner occupied STRs are good for Woodstock. This group said yes, that they are good for Woodstock. I'm not weighing in on my opinion. I'm just saying, here's what the numbers are telling me. So now I'm breaking out Woodstock residents, and these are the 4 groups. We got Woodstock residents and not Woodstock residents. We have people that have the STRs and don't have STRs. So those are the 4 groups: residents with STR, residents without an STR, non-residents with, non-residents without. So people that don't have an STR, pretty much a strong yes, we should strengthen regulations. Should there be fewer owner occupied? More people disagreed than agreed. Should we have fewer non-owner occupied? Pretty strong yes. The Woodstock residents who don't have an STR think we should have fewer non-owner occupied. All STRs have full-time resident on premise during all STR rentals. People are saying, yes, that's really better. That should be the case. All full-time residents can have an STR if they're on premise, but it can't be an LTR. More people said yes than no. All full-time residents can have an STR if they are on premise during STR rentals when it could be an LTR. More people said no, that should not be the case. That's not good. If you have a space that could be a long-term rental, they don't necessarily like all full-time residents being able to have one if it could have been a long-term rental. Should we reduce the number of nights a non-owner STR can be rented? Most people said yes. More said yes than no. Should we reduce the number of nights owner-occupied STR with owner on premise should be rented? More people said no, we should not reduce that than said yes. Owner-occupied STRs with owners on premise during rentals are good for Woodstock. People said yes. Non-owner occupied STRs are good for Woodstock. People said no. So residents from Woodstock that don't have an STR don't like the non-owner occupied. They do support the owner occupied. So that's what I read from what this group is saying. If you look at the Woodstock residents who do have an STR, so that's what the residents who don't have an STR said. Those that do have an STR say, we know we should not strengthen the STR regulations. Everybody seems to agree that we should not have fewer owner occupied STRs. Should we have fewer non-owner occupied? The group that has STRs thinks that we should not reduce the non-owner occupied. The groups that have an STR, should all STRs have a full-time resident? They don't agree with that. People who reside in Woodstock and here's where we didn't scrub the list to verify what is the people put their residents in their answer. We didn't scrub. I have a list now that I can use to just say double check that everybody's address really is in Woodstock. We haven't done that yet, but taking everybody at their word that they're a Woodstock resident, people that do have an STR say that they don't believe the STR should have a full-time resident on premise. All full-time residents can have an STR if they're on premise and it can't be a long-term rental. More said yes than no, but it's not a mandate really. All full-time residents can have an STR if they're on premise when the space could instead be in long-term rental. Same number. It's very interesting. It's the same number that people who have an STR think you ought to be able to do it the same amount, whether or not your space could have been a long-term rental. Do we want to reduce the number of nights a non-owner occupied can be rented? No, they don't want you to do that. So if somebody lives in Woodstock and they have an STR, they don't want you to reduce the number of nights that a non-owner occupied can be rented. For owner occupied, they really don't want you to reduce that. So that number is, that's really a mandate. 93% said no, you don't want to reduce the number of owner occupied. And owner occupied STRs with owners on premise are good for Woodstock. A strong yes. Because I think that's what a lot of people that took the survey, well, we do have, I do know we have a fair number of STRs, owner occupied, where people really need that to pay their bills. And so I'm not surprised that that was a strong yes. Non-owner occupied STRs are good for Woodstock. That's a pretty strong yes too. So the group of people that have STRs, still everybody likes owner occupied better, but still that group of people that are Woodstock residents and have STRs are still saying that they like the non-owner occupied. For people that are non-residents, only 40 responders, our numbers are getting smaller. What do they think? So people who do not have an STR think that we should strengthen the regulations. And some of these are people that did move out of town because they got pushed out because of the STR way the STRs are working, where long-term rentals are being, long-term renters are being evicted so that people can have a revolving door and make more money with short-term rentals. So, and I do know from the comments that we had people in that category that took the survey. So people that aren't Woodstock residents who don't have an STR here, should we have fewer owner occupied? Not a strong mandate. Should we have fewer non-owner occupied? 68% said, twice as many said fewer non-owner occupied. Should all STRs have a full-time resident on premise? Not a mandate of an answer. Full-time residents can have one STR if they're on premise during STR and the room couldn't be a long-term rental. More said yes than no. Full-time residents can have one STR if they're on premise during STR rentals when the space could have been a long-term rental. People said no, that all full-time residents should not be able to have one STR if their space could have been a long-term rental. Should we reduce the number of nights non-owner occupied STR can be rented? They agree. The group of people who, and again, I think it's people that got pushed out, is a fair number of these. Should we reduce the number of nights owner occupied STR with owner on premise can be rented? More said yes than no. Owner occupied STRs with owners on premise are good for Woodstock. More agreed than didn't. And they thought that non-owner occupied are not good for Woodstock. And then non-residents of Woodstock who do have an STR, should we strengthen the regulations? No, that was a pretty strong no. Should there be fewer owner occupied STRs? They disagree that there should be fewer. Everybody seems to disagree that, nobody seems to want fewer owner occupied STRs. Should there be fewer non-owner occupied STRs? Well, this group disagrees with that too, because that's pretty much what they've got, I would say. If somebody does not live in Woodstock and they have an STR, by definition, I think they're a non-owner occupied. So it's not a surprise that they disagree with this statement. All STRs have full-time resident on premise during all STR, should all STRs have full-time resident on premise during all STR rentals? 100% said no. Well, by definition, again, this is a group of people that have STRs in Woodstock, but they don't live here. So it's not a surprise that they said no, because they can't do that if that was a requirement. All full-time residents can have one STR if they are on premise during STR rentals and the room is not suitable to be in a long-term rental. Kind of a mixed bag. They pretty much agree more so than disagree, but a lot of neutrals on that one. All full-time residents can have one STR if they're on premise during STR rentals when the space could instead be a long-term rental. So, and more people disagreed than agreed, but it's not a mandate, clearly. It's a pretty even spread with those answers. Should we reduce the number of nights non-owner occupied STR can be rented? 95% said no. Again, this is, it's a business for the people, and it would hurt the business to reduce it for the people that do own STRs. And that's how I read that. Should we reduce the number of nights that owner occupied STR with the owner on premise can be rented? No. And all four groups seem to agree with that. Owner occupied STRs with the owners on premise during rentals are good for Woodstock. Yes, people agree. And it's interesting, non-owner occupied STRs are good for Woodstock. Even more people of this group of people that don't live in Woodstock, but they do have an STR there, more people agree that non-owner occupied are good for Woodstock than agree that owner occupied are good for Woodstock. So that's, and then in this file here, I've got the full questions. Because again, I abbreviated them at the top, otherwise it would have been easy to review. So there are some trends, and I'll just share, I will share my opinions at this point. I think that there are some trends. The owner occupied STR, I personally think it's important to keep in mind the four groups, because I think it's important that we know, what are the residents of Woodstock who don't have a short-term rental think, because that's most of them. What are the residents of Woodstock who do have a short-term rental think? Of the non-residents, I think some people got pushed out of town, and I think that's probably a lot of what the group of non-residents who don't have an STR, people that got pushed out of town. I think we should care what they think. And we also have the group of STR people who don't live in Woodstock, and they do have STRs. By definition, they are non-owner occupied. And I think we need to pay attention to what they think as well, because Woodstock needs to be a vibrant community. And so I don't know what the answers are all going to be, but I think it's important that we understand what the needs of the different groups are, and see what the answer might be. But I do think that the trend is that owner occupied, it looks like owner occupied, all the groups agree that owner occupied is good. Pretty much all the groups are fine with the idea of saying owner occupied. You can all have one short-term rental if you're renting out a room that could not be a long-term rental anyway. So we're not taking away any long-term housing for anybody. So it seems of the groups, all four groups seem to be okay if something couldn't be a long-term rental, letting people have letting as many people as want to have a short-term rental ability if they're renting out rooms. But then the difference of opinion comes in with a non-owner occupied. Some people think it's good, some people think it's not good, depending on what your situation is, which of the four categories are. Each of the four categories seem to have different statements on that. So that's my summary of what I see. I don't know what the answers are then. I believe that we're getting an answer on the owner occupied because there's not a difference of opinion there. I think that we do not have an answer on the non-owner occupied because we do have a difference of opinion. And so we have some more discussions there. So anyway, I talked a bunch, and I don't know who else wants to say anything.
Well, just I suppose first off, thank you for organizing this. I think it's very helpful to see it this way, and I think you did a great job, putting the categories together. It does seem that maybe some of the questions are a little reduced, and yeah, I know you said you came up with summaries, but
well, they're at the bottom. Let me give you the whole questions here.
Because the only one I just want to put out there that I'm looking at and thinking, well, just as we discuss it, I think it's 5 and 6, because we phrased it as a sort of different question than I think the summary kind of looks like.
Okay.
So I just want to consider that, as we go. I'm not saying that the reduction is necessarily not what's the word I'm looking for? Not honoring, that question, just to make sure we're looking at it from that way too.
Well, I got them. You can see them both at once right now. So, like you say, question 5. You can see question 5 down below, but you can also see question 5 up here. So you can kind of read it. And my print may be so small you can't really read it.
No, and I've got it open here. I just think as we go through this, I just want to remember those two particularly, 5 and 6. Those are the only ones where I thought maybe let's just review some of those, because the question we asked was more about expanding the access and the number of days to owner occupied versus non-owner occupied STRs, rather than say having just an owner on the
not exactly, because both 5 and 6. You said 4 and 5 or 5 and 6?
5 and 6.
Well, 5 and 6, and I have the exact wording down here on this row 65 and 66. The town should allow an unlimited number of full-time residents to each have one STR, provided they are on the premise during rentals. And so this has to do with owner occupied. Both 5 and 6 have to do with owner occupied. The one says that the STR couldn't be used as a long-term rental anyway. And then the other one says your STR could have been a long-term rental. So these are the exact wordings in the,
Oh,
no,
okay, I suppose that's fair.
yeah, non-owner occupied was different questions. Like 7 was non-owner occupied.
I mostly want to turn it over though to Jude, because I do think, again, not to be reductive about it, it just, when we look at these percentages as a percentage of our sample, I think it is going to be important at some point, maybe not necessarily for the non-residents, though I don't see why not, but to take the 2 categories of Woodstock residents who do and Woodstock residents who do not have an STR, and weigh the responses of our sample against their makeup of the population. And I think Jude had a suggestion on that, but that's the only thing I'd really like to see added to this right now.
Yeah, okay. And let me bring up Jude's page. So the one question that I do have about Jude's page is because I know that since I worked on what I just showed you, I know what went into that. I know that I took out the 8 duplicates. I know that with the 8 duplicates, I took their later answer, figuring that's what they really wanted more so than their earlier answer. And I also looked at the 4 groups. I looked at, are you in Woodstock? By looking at the 4 groups, we know that what all 4 of them are saying. And so this is looking at, I guess, all of the answers, taking out the 8 duplicates, or are the 8 duplicates still in here?
I think maybe 6 of the duplicates are still in there. If I can talk about this for a minute.
Sure. Yes, please.
Okay. So, so in looking at this, 30% of the respondents were short-term rental owners. So that's not really an accurate percentage of the residents of Woodstock. I looked at the list, at least of permitted STR owners, and it's 257, which is far less than 10% of the population. I don't know what percentage it is, but I just broke this down to give it a weight of 10%. It probably really should be 5. And again, I'm just going to say, in terms of this survey, we knew that it's not perfect. We didn't get everybody to respond. We know that nobody has checked to see whether or not people were forthcoming about who they really were, or if they really had an STR, they didn't. I don't know that we're going to have a chance to really go through and dissect that. I don't know. But so I do think, in my suggesting we do this was just to try to get a sense of a few more people than the people who show up at the meetings. And so I think we do.
Oh, sure.
We do have a little bit of a snapshot here of, certainly, I think we got a pretty good response. So all I did was I asked someone to help me with this, because I'm not an Excel master, but just to break it down into, if the STR owner responses, again, if people were forthcoming about if they did own one or not, again, we don't really know, but these are general perspectives that we're getting, right? To break it down, so they were really a little bit more like 10% of the population. Like I said, it really should have been probably more like 5, but to give them the benefit of the doubt, because there are some people in there who are non-residents who are also STR owners, just to sort of get a look and see how, if it changes a lot. It's a little bit, it is different. I don't know if you want me to go through it, if you want to go through it. The percentages are, it looks a little bit different. The town should strengthen STR regulations. I believe that says, and I'm sorry, I'm working on a laptop, 64% said yes.
Yep.
The town should reduce the number of permitted owner-occupied STRs. 48% said no, 36% said yes, 17%. The neutrals are interesting to me because it means they don't have an opinion, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
The town should reduce the number of permitted non-owner occupied STRs. That was 70%. And that's weighing, with the STR owners giving them a 10% weight. The town should require all STRs to have a full-time primary resident owner on premises during all STR residents and rentals. That was 53%. So that was a little bit more than half. Town should allow an unlimited number of full-time residents to each have one STR provided they are on the premises during rentals. And I had to abbreviate that, and it's not suitable for a long-term rental.
Mhm.
53% agreed. The town should allow an unlimited number of full-time residents to each have an STR provided they are on the premises during rentals, even if it could be used as a long-term rental. And that was only 37% that said yes, 49% said no.
Mhm.
Woodstock should reduce the number of nights that non-owner occupied STR can be rented. 57% said yes. Woodstock should reduce the number of nights that an owner occupied STR with owner on premises can be rented. And 53%, they disagreed. They said, no, we shouldn't. But, but it's, some of these numbers are not huge mandates. Some of them are more so. Then it says owner occupied STRs with owner of the premises during rentals are good for Woodstock. 60% said yes. Non-owner occupied STRs are good for Woodstock, and 64% said no. So it's just a little different look of kind of weighting it and counting everybody. As we know, this is not perfect. This is not a voting booth, and we're not getting people's IDs, but it does give a little sense of where people are. And I think you're right. There are some trends, and and I guess, my feeling about this going in is that people who live in town, who are residents, they are on the premises and they need some help. That's something the town should probably be encouraging, just as they did when they allowed accessory apartments in town. That was the whole motivation.
Mhm.
One of the things I just wanted to mention is that somebody had written to actually a very thoughtful comments about the situation, and what they were talking was that people who I'm assuming are non-residents own more than one STR in town, and you're only allowed to have one. So that's something we probably have to look at, and we probably have to start asking for names and not get LLCs, LLP, whatever they are. Yeah. So anyway, that was just a different look at the whole group. I really appreciate what you did, Laura, by breaking them all down, but I don't think we can consider all four groups the same, because, for example, the non-residents who own STRs, there's only 22 of them. That's probably most of them, in fact. So I don't think they should count quite as much as the people who are residents.
Well, and I think, and I guess, and the reason why I did the 4 groups is because I think we need to take, I mean, my goal is to not wind up hurting anybody, and to do what's best for Woodstock. And that's kind of a complex answer, because it's not, if it were an easy answer, we would have already done it. So it's not, it's a little complex. So I'm planning, I believe we shouldn't ignore any group, and we
Right.
shouldn't discount any group, but we're gonna, just as you weighted in this fashion, I think we're gonna be weighting things in a certain way. But whereas some things is, I think that we may be able to consider, if somebody is going to be owner occupied, if they're going to be on their premise when they STR, and they are renting a room in their house that does not have a microwave, it doesn't have they're sharing a bathroom, whatever, they're just renting a room in the house that is not a long-term rental, we may want to say, hey, that can be unlimited. If it's deemed by, if the building department goes and they do a review and they verify, yes, indeed, this is not suitable for a long-term rental, we may consider unlimited for the non-owner occupied. For the owner occupied, I don't see us stopping non-owner occupied. However, we may want to consider, how do we make sure it's the right number? And my opinion is always not to hurt those that are already doing it, but if we have something that says, hey, if you're gonna, if people no longer have a short non-owner occupied short-term rental, whoever buys the property next, we maybe don't let them do it. So I think we want to figure out what we think the right answer is. My goal is not to hurt anybody who's already got it. I think that the answer is, no matter how you look at it, say people appreciate the owner occupied who is opening their doors and there as people come in and use a room in their house. That's something that we say, hey, that's helping the person pay their bills, pay their property taxes. Somebody who would have a long-term rental, and they're choosing to short-term rental when it could be a long-term rental, we maybe don't put a stop to it, but that would have a cap. And when people want to have non-owner occupied, that would have a cap. And so I see us as handling some of these things with caps, and we set the cap where we want it to be, where maybe the way we get there is attrition, that if somebody has one today, they can keep having it. But when they sell their property, their ability for the non-owner occupied STR is not transferable, and helps us perhaps, if our cap is lower than the actual today, maybe that's when we start saying, hey, okay, you did it, we're not going to take it away from you. However, when the next person buys your property, the cap is too low, they're not going to be able to do it. If we think that we need to, if we think that we've got too many non-owner occupied. The other part of the complexity is Woodstock is a tourist town. So there is some value to Woodstock being a vibrant, healthy town. There's some value to having some non-owner occupied. My personal opinion is not to bring the number to zero. My personal opinion is we try to use some judgment and conversation to figure out what is the right number, so that Woodstock continue to be a vibrant town. I lived here back in, I think it was 2008, when the whole shopping district of Woodstock, there was a worry that it was going to totally shut down because we had a big recession of 2008. I think Woodstock is more vibrant because Woodstock has that shopping street. I think Woodstock's more vibrant because it has Kachina, and it's got the Woodstock Playhouse, and it's got the Bearsville Theater, and it's got the Station Bar, and I think, and all the restaurants. I think Woodstock is more vibrant because of those things. And so I think that, I don't know what the right answer is for the amount of non-owner occupied, but Woodstock there's a lot of stuff that folds together that I think makes Woodstock special. So the trick is going to be to figure out where to draw the line for different things.
Well, I think we're coming into a time where there is more creative and courageous legislation being passed to address these issues. For other towns and cities. I mean, I definitely understand where you're coming from and what you're saying. It would also, of course, be nice if we had a vibrant and healthy fire department and a vibrant
yes,
school
yes,
system.
Yes.
There are other things too that really come at a great cost
Right.
when we don't take these things. Now, I mean, again, to me, I'm not so worried about us over analyzing necessarily, any one particular group. I'd love, maybe next time too, to look at, Jude, I'd like to know more about how the weighting there works, because I am not an Excel whiz, and I have been absolutely humbled in my quest to become even, somewhat, momentarily competent. But I would like, to get an idea of the formula, that was used there. Because again, like you said at the outset, at a glance, because you look at the registered number of STR owners, or even if we say number of STRs, everyone's only supposed to have one. So if there is 257 legal STRs, those are the STR owners anyway that count. They are the ones who are doing it legally and above board and ostensibly the right way, whether they're owner occupied or non-owner occupied. But that being said, at that rate, 250 is at best 5%, and so taking those numbers, putting them in a ratio of saying, and again, I am not an expert. I'm going to look into this some more because I couldn't find it in time, but we have Woodstock residents who have an STR, Woodstock residents who do not. 323 versus 131. Again, on the survey, that looks like a third versus, a difference of roughly 3 to 1. But really, again, if we extrapolate that against the population, we're talking about the comparative ratio being more like 1 to 0.005. You see what I'm saying?
I know.
So that's, I want to just make sure that, maybe in the course of doing this, not necessarily tonight, I have a couple people I'd like to talk to about it, and it's on my computer over here. I'm talking to you on my iPad because that's the most recent piece of technology I have. But I'm looking at this. If you can see that,
It's a big white square.
well, that's then But it's how to use weighting in a survey, and they're talking about the pros and cons, because you have to be careful about it. It can be time consuming and require assumptions to be made, and it can introduce complexity and error. But I think it is just, again, great, amazing work, Laura. It's the one thing I want us to get a little more in the weeds about, just to make sure we have a very accurate idea of what the extrapolated representation is like. And again, and then we should just as much turn our attention to the other copy, and not now because I see it has all of the address information still in there, but just to maybe review some comments and stuff like that. I personally do want to, and this is why I'm saying, we can give equal weight to everyone. 22 responders isn't too much, and we know what their bias is. It's right there. It's just cooked into the numbers. But I think it's important for us, especially the non-residents, and at least some of the stories of people who did lose their place. I want to make sure that that is publicly heard by the committee.
Right. Well, totally. So what I'd like to do with the, so first of all, and I'm assuming that people on the call, the file well, do take things one at a time. Do people on the call want me to have, and you can all, let me stop sharing so I can see more people at once here. And let me go see if I can change my view. I seem to be seeing the person who's talking big, and then I see everybody else is small, so I don't see everybody. Let me try to, I forget how to, view, there we go. Let me click on view gallery. Yay, okay. So I'm assuming that people, and you can raise your Zoom hand. How is that? If you, and probably, you probably know how to raise your Zoom hand. Go ahead, Jude.
Before you do that, can we let Joe weigh in?
Oh, Joe, thank you. Yes, Joe, do you have things you want to add, Joe?
Thank you for doing all that work. I hate to be glib, but I think the public has spoken. And it's pretty clear to me what the sort of overall tilt is. So I think if, we want to put some finer points on it, along the lines of Connor and you and Jude have suggested, just to make sure we're crossing the T's and dotting the I's, we should do that. But I think we have some pretty clear direction.
So in your view, tell me what you think the clear direction is.
That the owner occupied units are more acceptable, safer, better for the community, provide some measure of accountability. And there should still be reasonable limits on those, but I think it's pretty clear that the people who completed the survey find that a better option than non-owner occupied units.
So it's a better option, but in your view, what are they saying about non-owner occupied?
I mean, I don't know exactly what they're saying, but my suspicion is that there's less control and less accountability, and less safeguards, in the sense that an owner who's occupying the unit would have the same incentives to make sure that the neighborhood and quality of life and everything is maintained because they're living there. So it's, I think, a check on some of the, anecdotal complaints that people make about these types of units that when they're not owner occupied. So, I don't know every reason why everybody answered the survey, but the results seem pretty consistent to me in the different categories.
Mhm.
I was actually going to ask, but just real quick, sorry to interrupt, but
No, go ahead.
you're so good at organizing these things, Laura. I am wondering if you wouldn't be able to create a couple of individual tables sorted by group that would show the comments, essentially laid it out like this, but instead of the answers to the questions, it's just the submissions delineated under which group they are and then their comments, and that way I could look at them in the same sort of organized.
So what I was thinking, so what I'm thinking of doing is, anyway, let me ask the question I was going to ask of people on the call, and you can raise your Zoom hand. So there are three questions that I'll ask. One is, I showed my numbers, which is broken out by 4 groups. If people want to raise your Zoom hand, should I ask? Well, first of all, let me ask the ZRC. Do you all see any reason why I shouldn't share those on the town website? I mean, it's not private data. It's a summary. It doesn't have any names on it.
You're talking about this table that you just showed us?
The thing that I just showed you, is there any reason that you think we shouldn't be putting on the town website?
No, not necessarily. I think it should have some sort of caveat to make sure people understand this is of respondents and not population, at least until we have that formula settled on. But I think this is fine, no personal info, that's all.
Yeah, well, and I could, if it makes more sense, because I know, as Jude has raised a really good point, that I mean, I could just put the final 4 tables that say, here's the 4 groups, and avoid saying, if you roll them all up, here's what you have, because Jude has raised a really good point, that if you want to roll them all up, you probably should do some weighting, and maybe all I put up there was the 4 separate groups, and let people divide, derive from that what they may, to say, well, if somebody's a Woodstock resident, they don't have an STR, here's what that group thinks, and Woodstock resident do have an STR, here's what they think. And then the other 2 groups with the total number of respondents, and then just what the answers are. Then we don't have to worry about weighting, because you just say, hey, these are what the 4 groups think. And we could have a comment that says, hey, about 5% of Woodstockers are STR owners. So then we wouldn't have to worry about a weighting. So I could put the whole thing that I showed, or I could just put the last 4 tables that just is each of the 4 groups.
I like putting this as is. I think I don't want to imply weighting and give people like space to do bad math, essentially. Like
Right, you're right about that.
If we can, close the daylight, between that, just so we can say, like, we confidently extrapolated. And again, to me, at a glance, it looks like 1 to 0.005 is the ratio of STR owners versus non-STR owners. And again, someone, it looks, maybe Michael Henry mentioned it, I'm seeing in the comments, about household. So again, even if we decided we could do a second, because again, owners, that's the number. Households, if we want to be generous, we could bump that up to 10% and say, like, okay, let's give them a little bit more weight, because we have to figure maybe there's a spouse who agrees or something like that. I don't know. But even so, then we're talking about 0.01 to 1 versus 0.005. And that's it. All done.
So I could add a note about number of STRs versus number of households, so people would know that. So your thought is, instead of that if I were to show it, your thought, Connor, is just show everything that I just showed with a couple of notes that it's as is, it's raw data, it's as is, and And then just add a note of how many STRs in Woodstock versus how many households we have, just so that people have an idea of, they can.
And honestly, you know, we could if you made another table like the one I described, where essentially category A and B are organized the same, but it'd be a much longer thing with all the where we see all the respondents and all the comments, but none of the personal info. We could talk more about saying, okay, maybe that can go up too, as long as we review the comments and nothing personal lines up in there. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Well,
don't think anyone, I didn't notice anyone share more personal info in the comments, but
Well, okay, let me like take one thing at a time. So,
Yeah.
so we'll talk about that about that file in a minute, but so now we're just on the file I just showed. So Jude, you had your hands up.
I would like you to make that file that Connor's talking about, separating them out from residents, non-residents, STR owners.
The comments.
The comments. And then when you have that, I would put the whole thing up together. That's sort of how the comprehensive plan was. You know, we got the numbers, but we also got all the comments, all at
Yeah.
once. And
Okay.
I think it would be, if we could do it all together, I think it would be better.
Okay, so let me, so what my plan is for the file with the comments is my plan is it'll be a big file, but that's okay. It's got 516 rows plus the header row, because that's how many we had that weren't duplicate responses. And so it would be all the rows, it would actually be all the data. But as I said before, what I would do is I would delete the columns that have the person's name and address, and I would keep the column that says in what order did they take the survey, and I would just have that column be the first column. So if we needed to track back for any reason, we could find the row. But in any event, so what I would do, and I would have it sorted by, I could have Woodstock, just like I showed this file. Here's the Woodstock residents that don't have an STR, and I could, you know, make like put a color, not the whole thing colored because it's harder to read, but have the, you know, the thing that says, hey, these are not, you know, these are Woodstock residents, not STR, have that column in a color. So when you look at the comments over to the right, you know what you're looking at all those together, and then you can go, so I would keep it all in. I wouldn't take out the answers, because the answers help you understand the context of the comment. So I would do the whole thing, but again, I would, so I'm thinking I'm building a file that I think is exactly what you said, where again, it's got all the rows, but the name and the address is out, and it's got the number that says what order did you take the survey, that's the number. And then, and I'll notice when and if there's duplicate, I'll say, because the duplicates, I took out the row, I took out the earlier row for the 8 duplicates. I took out the earlier row of what they said, but I kept the comments and I put it in the row that I kept. So I didn't get rid of anybody's comments. I just got rid of their first answer, because for the multiple choice, you got to pick one or the other. And oh, by the way I did it, because I combined strongly agree and somewhat agree, and I combined strongly disagree and somewhat disagree, because I combined those, it didn't really much matter, because in most cases, in almost every case, they just moved from one to the other, how strongly they agreed or disagreed. So really, the fact that they did duplicate, we didn't lose much in the, anyway.
Yeah.
So that's how I would do that file.
Yeah, I saw that in the second file you sent. It was not any market difference most of the time.
Yeah, not a big swing.
And by the way, that's how I looked at it too. They agree.
Right. Because that helps us see the direction. Yeah. So, okay. So we're talking about putting 2 files out. One is the file as I described with the detail, but no names and no addresses. And the other is the file that I just showed exactly as is, but with a comment, if I can, that says, by the way, how many STRs versus how many households do we have, just so that people have an idea of the context of how Woodstock is. So that being the case, the 2 files, go ahead, Jude.
I'm not clear. So the one file would be the 4 different categories that you showed us.
Well, everything that I showed, because I said, should I just lift out the 4 categories? Connor said, just give the whole thing, because otherwise people might do funny math. I can just give just what I showed, that showed just the raw answers as we got them, but then broken out so it's 7 categories. One is everybody, one is Woodstock, one is not Woodstock, and then one is Woodstock STR, Woodstock not STR, not Woodstock STR, not Woodstock, not
No,
STR.
it was great the way you broke it out.
Yeah, well, thank you. And it took a while, by the way.
It
But
it took me a while and I didn't even get anywhere. I mean, I had to read it one at a time like a caveman.
yeah, there you go. So anyway, but I think it helped us understand the directions because because the 4 categories matter and the 4 categories have different needs, and it's
Right.
good that we think of all of them as we proceed.
Right. The
So-
whole thing was a lot of work from start to
Okay.
finish.
So what's that, Jude?
I said the whole thing was a lot of work from start to finish. So
Yeah, well, and a huge thank you to
very
Jude,
proud of
a huge thank you to you, because the survey, you are our anchor person for getting the survey together, and you are our anchor person for getting the flyers put together and the postcards put together. So you were an anchor in so many ways. So yeah, I just did the wrap up here at the end.
that was the Excel work was a lot of work, and also just again, just really gratified that so many people responded.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we did good. I think we're number 2, right?
Yeah, we're number 2. We are we're number 2, which is pretty good because it's hard to beat that comp plan. But yes, and Connor, thank you for your help because I know you were supportive the whole way and weighing in, and yeah, it was a team effort. And Joe, you came in at the right time, so so we're good. Okay, so all that being said, I was going to ask for a rate if anybody wants to raise their hand, but I'm assuming that people on the call do want to see the data. I'm assuming you would like me to put the data we talked about, the file that has the detailed data and the file that has a summary that I showed. I see one person says yes.
I can tell you with near certainty that there are a lot of people are going to want it. When I announced that we were closing the survey on social media, I immediately got requests to see the survey info. So, they'll want it.
Yeah. Okay. So so I got one thumbs up on the call here, but I'll assume as you said, kind of that people want it. So with I'll do color coding for the now our website has limitations from the standpoint of it would be nice if we could put like a paragraph and then here's the file. It kind of lets you put the file kind of without the paragraph. So in any event, we'll get it out there. I may put a couple of comments at the beginning of the file, but probably more so in the summary file because that's not as big. I probably won't put any comments in the file that has the detailed data because it'll, I think, throw things off. But the other one is kind of a summary file. So if I put any comments, I'll just put it in the other file because I don't think I can put comments. You read the comment on the website and then you click on the document. I think there's a limit to what Melanie can put on there. So I'll do my best with it. So
Good.
yay. So a momentous occasion. So good. So aside from posting the file, what are our next steps?
Well, I have 2 suggestions when it comes to the STR work. I still think it's not a bad idea to have maybe Lord Farmer give us another visit. While I'm not saying that, we need tons of unending input, he was a particularly valuable and I think relatively uncontroversial presenter, and it has been going on 2 years
Yes.
since we spoke to him. There are, I'm sure, all kinds of methods and trends and things that could inform what we're doing now, and it's never, it's like never a bad idea probably to get a checkup, that kind of thing. So I think having him back and considering, maybe any other speaker, who, again, roughly 2 years in from our last round of expert presenters could reaffirm and renew our perspective on this. And on a bit of a tangent, I of course want to know where we're at with the scenic overlay. Last I heard, you were going to send me a file.
Well, I thought I did.
Um,
Did you never get that?
I'm not sure. Let me see.
Okay, I thought I sent everybody and what I was going to do is I was going to have you all make sure, because you had asked me to, because we looked at it on the last call And then I think I had asked, because as long as the ZRC is ready for it to go to the next step, I'm gonna resend it to the planning board and just see, because Judy Kerman helped me do those words you looked at. So if the planning board wants changes, I'm gonna say, hey, wait a minute, I did what Judy told me to, you approved it before, I did what Judy told me to do. So
so-
but in any event, but I thought I sent it out right after our last
And
meeting.
and you know what? You're right. You did. I did look at it. Actually, it was open. It was just so long ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
it was.
so-
It was about.
If you three tell me it's good to go to the planning board, that's the next step, is I'll send it back to the planning board to make sure that they're good, so I can send it back to the town board. And if you three all say, yes, do it, I will do it.
Well, basically, I mean, I know that, I looked at the red that was there, to see what, I assume that's the most of what we were looking at. Everything else where I was going over this looks pretty much like what we discussed, especially things in section G, and looking at the minimizing of tree cutting, defining non-essential tree cutting in section G. But then after in section H, I wanted to say I'm okay with with the red lettering of clarifying that with a special use permit for property maintenance, property owners will be permitted with the advice of a forester.
Right. So it's not rampant. They got to have somebody weighing in. And that's what the planning board, that's why I talked to Judy Kerman. I wanted to make sure the planning board didn't think it was too much work for them, because that's work for them, and they approved it. So, okay.
Yeah.
So do, between Connor, Jude, and Joe, do the three of you agree is good? Thank you. Okay. So all say okay to send to.
Thank you.
Okay, and thank you for bringing it up. So we're good on that. We're making lots of progress. So again, getting back to inviting Kyle Lord Farmer to visit us again. The purpose is to talk about any new methods or trends that we should know about. I can share with him what our survey said, so that he knows what we know. And so I'll see when I can get him doing that. So go ahead, Jude.
So just in terms of next steps, something that I was thinking about that I saw that the town board changed the fee structure.
Yes.
Yeah, I was, and this had occurred to me before you guys even did that, because we've been having these conversations. We were really struggling with definitions of owner occupied, non-owner occupied. I think we should revisit that. I think we should have categories: owner on premises, owner not on premises.
Right.
Maybe a third category. I'm always following what other communities are doing. And, we had taken a page from Kingston's book, which
Right.
was, if you're doing, a few weekends a year, that's a separate category. But I think, we don't have to wrestle with what's an owner occupied anymore. I think it's either you're on the premises or you're not. And that seems
Okay.
that's how the town is setting up the fee structure. It would make a lot of sense if the law followed that as well.
Mhm.
So I think that's something that we can address. And I think it finally, we really wrestled with that. And I think this is the answer. And I think, on premises or not on premises, that's pretty easy to define. I mean, we're not talking about you can't go to work if you have a job, or
You can't go to the grocery store. Right. You can go to the grocery store. You can, yeah.
Yeah, you can go to the store, you can go out to dinner, you can, but
Yeah.
in any case, I think that might be something for us to look at. The other
Good,
thing,
yeah.
I had a very brief conversation with William in the building department, and I would like to go talk to him some more, just to get his
Sure.
feedback on, how Granicus is working, and, what
Mhm.
he's seeing, and all of those things. And then, there's a lot more for us to talk about, but I think that might be a good place for us to start.
Okay, good. Okay. So my to-do is to invite Kyle Lord Farmer. Jude, you're gonna talk with Bill Spencer some more, right? Or,
Yes.
so you'll talk with Bill Spencer. I'll see if I can get Kyle Lord Farmer back at another meeting. And I think you're 100% correct. I appreciate that we've taken the time to step back, take a breath, do this survey, and see the responses come back, because I think that this is going to help us. But we may want it, but even the owner occupied, I did like the distinction that our survey said, where if you're renting a space that can't be a long-term rental anyway, maybe just let people do as much as that as you want. But if you're renting a space that could be a long-term rental, think about, so we just want to think about what we as a group want to do about, because that may be another
Yeah.
category. of could it have been a long-term rental or it couldn't have been anyway, in which case, why cap it?
Well, the only thing I want to add to that is again, non-owner occupied versus owner occupied is the ultimate distinction there for me. And
On-prem or not on-prem is
and
chooses.
yeah, but the idea being that you know what I want us to be careful of when we go through this again and revise and tighten up and look is, you know, making sure that we're not encouraging the development of new spaces designed to be short-term rentals. Like, to me, that is something that is not, for when I say that, I mean the type of thing that, like, essentially what I'm driving at is I am inclined to say that the healthy way to address, like what Joe said, like, to me it's pretty clear what the public is saying, though I do want to get in there with a fine-tooth comb. I think saying that no new development can go towards non-owner occupied, whatever our version, non-owner on premise, is a good start, because we have, if we, you know, say like we want to thread the needle on improving access, especially as we all I think agreed for people who live locally, need the extra income, and within the parameters we're setting are present on the, or at least in what we would consider reasonably immediately available for their rental, are the people we want to support. And just to make sure that I do think it's not untoward and it would not be undercutting any interest in it, like yours, what you were saying, in keeping the town vibrant and attractive to tourists. I think we don't need to build a lot more in residential areas to do that. I think that should remain an imperative for us, is to make a clear distinction of, if you want to participate, you know, this is how it's got to be done. And if you are, if you cannot be present, if you are as owner not on premises or not owner occupied, then, you know, you're going to have to either meet some sort of specific parameters or whatever it is.
Yeah, well, I think that we can go back and Jude, we'll get to you in a sec. So I think we can revisit the idea. I'm thinking as you're talking about how we don't want people to be building new buildings for the purpose of a revolving door. If they're going to build a new building, let's help some long-term renters. We did toy with the idea of saying that, hey, we're going to have like a 3-year, when you buy a property, know that you can't STR it for 3 years. And maybe the answer to that is, if you're going to build a property, you know you can't STR it for 3 years. So we may want to revisit that as something that we're thinking of doing, so that if somebody's going to do it, they know that they can't be jumping right into it. And hopefully that would be a deterrent. I'm not sure we can prohibit it forever.
Well, I just want to clarify, because for me, it's like, if someone were to build a new home and create a space not suitable for long-term rental, past the issuing of this law, in my opinion, again, to protect the, you know, residential interests of the town and honor what I think is clear from these results, saying you can participate as an owner occupied STR the way everybody else can, but you cannot use that space as a non-owner occupied STR. Like, there needs to be, that is, at least to me, a target place for incentive to provide long-term rental.
So we'll figure that out. I may be more comfortable if we did it to have like a 3-year or something, as opposed to saying forever. So we may want to have some number of years that it would be active, but we can talk about that.
Sure.
And Jude, you want to say something?
When the accessory apartment law was put into place, if you had a space in your house, you were permitted. If you were talking about, I think it was a structure like, a garage or something you wanted to convert, I believe there was a waiting period. And I think in terms of building new, it might have been 5 years.
Oh, okay. Well, and maybe that's the number. We can talk about the number we're recommending. But I do think by having a wait period, because as I said before, I think that we we don't want to hurt those that have something set up, but we want to deter future things going in the wrong direction. So, yeah, so
Yeah,
the wait period of
we-
3 years or 5 years is something that would help be a
Yeah.
deterrent to things, future things happening that are in the wrong direction. So, okay, so I think we're pretty good. I do like to have a public be heard. I don't know if any public wants to be heard at the moment. Well, our next meeting is 2 weeks, by the way. So just as a reminder, our next meeting is in 2 weeks. Does any public want to be heard?
I could be heard. Hi,
Hey, Michael, how you doing?
I'm good. Happy New Year, everybody. And
Happy New Year.
thanks for all the heavy lifting on the statistics. And I think it's amazing that we got so many responses to the survey. That's really unusual and good. I just 2 questions. I haven't really looked into the details, but I know there's legislation that just came out of Albany that may affect how some reporting requirements go, or whether the town can actually start charging tax based on actual receipts. So I just want to make sure we're sort of tracking that. The other thing is, I don't even know how to express this exactly. This is me as a mediator. I think it's fine. I think everything you said about breaking things out by category makes sense. I do want to be aware of not setting the community up for battle lines between people who own STRs and people who don't. And by saying, people who don't own STRs don't want them, and people who do want STRs do want them, it's just sort of setting up the discussion in a little bit of a polarized way. And even in presenting the data broken out that way, I don't know what the solution is, but I just would hate to have the town sort of have an us versus them mentality between town residents who happen to have an STR or not.
Well, and I guess my reason for breaking it out is because if you didn't break it out, my reason for breaking it out is to say, hey, there's 4 groups and they all have different needs. And if we didn't break it out, and if we roll them all together into one answer, and as Jude says, if we do that, we got to weight it because, if we have 30% of the people that took the survey are STRs, but only 10% own it, then we ought to weight that number lower because it's, and then we may make decisions based on the aggregate that's not good for your group. So
No,
the reason
no,
why
I mean, it makes absolute sense to break it out.
yeah.
And
So
I
and hopefully people don't get polarized, but we've lived in Woodstock long enough to know things happen.
Yeah, they don't need much encouragement.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
But that
So-
being said, I am, and I was surprised. Well, maybe not surprised, but I look at this data, particularly residents who do versus do not, and I mean that not to draw a battle line, just looking at them comparatively. And again, while it swings strongly in predictable fashion, there is there's very little homogeny in any one group except for non-residents who own an STR. Right. They were pretty much down in 80s and 90%. There's definitely nuance. And when we get into the comments, I've reviewed, it feels like a lot of comments, but it might not be as many as it feels like compared to the total number. But, and again, I've been surprised at the nuance of the response of people on both sides of that conversation. And I think we can translate that, not translate, but I think we can honor that nuance in how we discuss it without sharing anyone's personal info, because I want people to hear these testimonials. That's a part of it, making sure it's not just numbers, but also to remember that, how people are affected on in every
right. No, I guess that's a good way to say it, to sort of lean into the nuance, because I kind of remember when I did my survey, I own an STR. I don't remember what I said about strengthening regulations, because I think some of them should be strengthened. I don't know, I probably put somewhat something, I don't remember, or even neutral. Because, yeah, I agree that when a existing STR non-owner occupied is sold, that the permit shouldn't travel with it. I agree that there should probably be a 3-year moratorium or a 5-year, or whatever the number is, after someone buys a new house before they can STR it, so it doesn't, because the whole idea of community, not a commodity, is coming back to that. All right, I've been talking a long time. Thanks, everybody, for.
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Anybody else from the public want to weigh in? Okay,
Oh, well,
yay. Oh, Heather's got her hand up. Heather, go ahead.
Hey, I just wanted to thank you guys for all the hard work on the survey. I think it is really helpful to see things, and I think I really appreciated what Laura said about the fact that, we want to look, we want to be able to work together to figure out ways that serve the whole community. And I
Mhm.
think that, I think even when, and I'm really curious to see the comments, because I do think that, there are some people who, maybe STR owners for different reasons, um, who have great care for the community. And I think that
Mhm.
being able to sort of recognize that, and, I'm, as we all know, I am an STR owner. And I spend lots and lots of weekends at my house, and I
Mm.
love Woodstock. And I think that that's not to be dismissed. I think just because I can't
Right.
live there full time, doesn't mean that my needs shouldn't be considered. So I do think in certain respects, like considering the different communities and what they need and how we serve the whole community without ignoring anyone's needs is important. So
Sounds
thank
great.
you.
Yep, I agree. So thank you. Anybody else have anything they want to throw in, add? Okay, cool. So our next meeting is in 2 weeks, 6:30, and I'm trying to figure out, yeah, every now and then we hit on a holiday, but I think that doesn't happen in January. I think we're good in 2 weeks. So, thank you, everybody, and I'll see what I can do about getting these things posted as described, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
yeah, and if you wouldn't mind sending over a copy of that before you post it to the town site, the comment
Okay.
version of the table,
Mhm.
I'd love to see that. And
Okay.
of course, thank you, and please do keep me posted on the scenic overlay movement. I'd love to
Okay.
see that
Yep.
move.
So, and thanks for keep nudging. It's good you keep nudging. We're getting there.
Long line of nudgers I come from.
There you go.
All right,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thank you,
I
everybody.
do we motion to adjourn or how do?
Oh, sure. I take it as a motion to adjourn, and I'll second it. All in favor?
All right.
Thank you.
Good night,
Good
everybody.
night, Jude. Good night, Joe. Good night, Laura. Good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.